Hello and a warm welcome to another episode. My guest today is Alexander Müller, former consultant at Roland Berger, head of revenue operations at FORTO and vice president revenue operations at Cognigy. Together we are talking about what are the indicators to set up a revenue ops team, who should be on your team and to whom should you report. So let's dive into it and welcome Alexander. So it's a pleasure to have you, Alexander, today and with me.
Thanks, Björn. Super happy to be here today.
So I checked before and on LinkedIn, and if you look at RevOps position titles, you just get 200 people in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany, and you set up twice RevOps teams in different startups. So I'm super curious, and I would suggest to just dive into it. Alexander, what did you learn while setting up RevOps teams at such a young stage of a company?
Yeah, that's actually a very, very interesting thing. And I noticed that also the whole title is booming, and LinkedIn actually also marked RevOps or RevOps Manager last year as one of the fastest and most growing job titles on LinkedIn's platform. And that, of course, is a little bit of benefit for myself, because we have been coining revenue operations in that sense already now for 5 years, more or less. So I have built up revenue operations previously at Logtech startup here in Berlin, FORTO. We were growing from roughly 20 people to 850. And then also at conversational AI startup Cognigy, where we built up a global revenue function. And now I'm actually supporting startups in the software space to build up a revenue function and to help all their go-to-market teams being more aligned. And to answer your question, what did I learn? I think that's a little bit too broad the question to just focus on one. There are actually so many learnings. And what I can definitely say is that the whole revenue operations function really also, due to what happened after COVID, what happened during the Ukraine war, about the economic downturn, became more and more important to so many companies.
All right, then let me help you to kind of give it a little bit more structure, because it was, of course, a very broad question. So when I look at RevOps, so what I would be curious about is what kind of indicators came up that you decided to create this new department? So that would be one angle.
Yeah.
The second angle is to start with the basics and saying, because RevOps, it's still quite new, at least in the German-speaking area. So what is your general understanding, or how did you define RevOps? Because for me, it's serving the entire customer journey. And the third component is where, from an organizational point of view, where should it be, what should be the direct reporting line? Because we both know that has a tremendous effect in the way RevOps is serving the company.
Yeah. So I think a very, very good starting point is really, when do companies actually think of setting up that position? And I noticed that also from the customers that I'm consulting and that I'm working with, that a very typical pattern for them is that they realize that they don't know actually what's happening on their go-to-market side. So especially when companies are growing, when they go global at the latest stage, or when they have more than one country that they are operating in, they often tend to note that actually the whole go-to-market process is not really aligned anymore. So marketing is doing something else than the BDRs are doing. Sales is selling in a different way, and in the worst case, even a different product, or a different wording at least about the product in different areas. And if you would ask 10 people in the same company, they would probably pitch you the product in a different way. And what that leads to is actually efficiency losses on the one hand, loss of control for management, and the worst then, of course, is that you're stuck in your growth motion. And when companies realize that these things come together, they are often looking for support. And I actually firmly believe that revenue operations can help companies here. And The definition for revenue operations is very, very hard to grasp. I myself always say that the support or the outcome of revenue operations should be an efficient go-to-market process. You really want to streamline the go-to-market process, and that's also why it's revenue operations and not only sales operations from the beginning to the end. And that is, in the end, the core of it is really to make the conversion rate along the funnel higher, to make the conversion rate quicker and the conversion speed quicker, and to really help go-to-market teams be as efficient as they can and align them across the whole funnel.
Now I would like to know more. So having this goal, which totally makes sense for me. So what would be kind of your first 2-3 hires, or how did you set up the team to serve exactly these goals? Because it sounds like a lot of data crunching, CRM optimization, and so forth. So I'm
Definitely.
curious.
I think when you want to hire for a revenue operations team, you really need to understand what do you actually need. And I always try to put that into different phases of the company. So revenue operations for me is basically 3 areas that it should be covering. One is the classical operations. I always say that's kind of the engineering, it's the building of the machine, the building of our racing car. The second is for me analytics. So I have already a good car. I need to know now in what corner of our racetrack or on what turn do I actually lose most of the time. And the third is then enablement. And with enablement, then I have a good car. I know where I'm losing time on the racetrack. And now I actually need to tell my drivers, and that's my go-to-market team, especially my account executives, but also my marketing teams, my customer success representatives, how can they be better with this specific car, and how can we make our lap a little bit quicker? Of course, it's super difficult to start with all of that, right? You can't start with everything at the same time. And I always give...
So
Yeah, you go ahead.
sorry to
No,
interrupt,
no,
but
okay.
I'm super fascinated. So let's start with the first one to set up the foundation, because I'm also working with a lot of startups. I've invested in seed and in growing companies. So the silo insights of marketing is doing his or her own stuff, then sales, customer success, and the alignment with product, it's getting super fast, super messy. So how do you really align everyone on the same page, that they are collecting the right data in the right amount, in the right, I would say, the right level of professionalism, if you are really growing a company? Because of course you could aim for the perfect scenario, but let's face it, it's never be perfect. So it should be kind of a process towards that goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really the tricky part, right? Especially when companies become too large. So I think always the perfect human network is around 130 people, right? That's a given thing. That's actually proven by science, and you can actually also relate that to companies. When when you have been working in a company with roughly 100 to 150 people, you actually know everyone. You know more or less what's going on in what area of the business. And of course, if a company is even smaller, then you often don't even have specific functions yet, right? And you're kind of doing everything all at once, especially in the startup world. And when companies are growing more, then this becomes really tricky, and you really need to have the touch points to the different areas. So revenue operations, not that much focused on the product side, more focused really on the go-to-market side, on the delivery. But you also need to have basically your touch points to any other area in the company, because revenue operations in itself is really a strategic function. It's not only about operating, not only, and definitely not a support unit for sales. And the way that I've been doing that in the past is that we really had a dedicated touch point and a dedicated person, even maybe a single point of contact for a specific department to any department in the company, because you cannot manage the revenue side if you don't know what marketing, of course, about their part, but also finance or product are doing, right? You need to know what are their priorities, and you need to include those to serve your customers in the end the best way, right? To bring out the
Mm-hmm.
right messaging. And coming,
So you were reporting to the operational line, or you were reporting to the financial um,
I've been
department?
seeing both, and there are actually um, supporting evidence for both sides as well, in my opinion. So I think there's only one thing that you definitely don't want, and that's having revenue operations report to the sales leader directly. Why? Um, if there is already a CRO, for instance, then it's definitely the CRO and not, for instance, the VP sales. You don't want it to be only sales operations, right? That's something different, and you don't want that silo. You actually want to have that neutral view, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
there are two, I would say, currently dominating positions. So that's either reporting to the CRO if there is one already existing. If not, then it's often the CEO or the CFO. And there are pros and cons for either. For the CRO, I think that it's the most obvious, right? I mean, even the title is similar, right? The Chief Revenue Officer and Revenue Operations working together. It's often the right hand.
Mm-hmm.
A very strong pro is definitely that you can really help the person that's having the biggest interest in the revenue organization as well, and you always have the management buy-in for your main projects. So that's definitely a pro. A con is actually that you're becoming a little bit blind maybe, and that you're not seeing what's actually really the neutral output of the revenue organization. And that's the big pro why a revenue operations is sometimes also sitting with the CFO, because the CFO in the end is interested in the neutral outcome. He or she really want to know what does actually my revenue function deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And the big con of this is that revenue operations can then also easily become a controlling function. And you don't want it to be only a controlling function, right? You also want to have those operational impacts of it. You also do want operations to support sellers in their day-to-day activity, right? You want to make them more efficient, and you definitely don't want to lose the touch point to the revenue function. And
Yeah.
I think just that's my biggest advice here. Always be a trusted partner for all sides of the business, and especially for the people that are talking to your customers every day. And that's the BDRs, that's the SDRs, that's the sales managers, and that's also marketing and product marketing.
Yeah, for me, the biggest con is what you mentioned. It's the lack of enablement when you went through the three pillars. So the one thing is, I would call it the technical structure, the tech stack. The other thing is the analysis part, and then you have the enablement part. We could argue about strategy, but comes to the organization
Yeah,
order in my point of view. The enablement part, it's and I think you would agree, or I have a strong indication. So this is super fundamental. So this is crucial. This is fundamental. And if you just have this RevOps, and this is what I see sometimes in the market, is that it's just a data department. It's a supporting unit, like you were saying. But the enablement part sets a good RevOps team, or how you call it, apart from, yeah, we just see some indications based on numbers or data, but we really find solution with all our supporting
yeah,
departments. Like, this is kind of the action stream for marketing. This is what we can support or improve in sales. This is the implications on customer success. This is product operations and so forth. So in my point of view, the enablement part is fundamental to really create this go-to-market machine engine, how you will call it, and this kind of contradicts or speaks against the CFO part.
Yeah.
But I totally follow that both ways could be.
Totally agree, and I think that's a very, very important thing that I also have been noticing that many companies tend to focus on too late. In the beginning, I always said, don't focus on enablement too early, right? Get your execution right, get your operations right, get your numbers correct, and then start bringing in enablement. But that's actually a big learning for myself as well, that many companies wait too long to bring in enablement, and it's super hard to find this person. And I think it's probably the most difficult to hire position within the revenue operations team, to find somebody who's really good in enablement, and to also decide when is the right time for a company to actually onboard somebody as a full-time position, for instance, to do enablement.
Yeah, and what I also see when the company is growing, that you have, in my world or in kind of my head, it's more like a metrics. So that you have kind of you have the ownership, or everything is coming together in RevOps, or some call it revenue strategy and operations, and then you have kind of work streams in how to improve the process, and then you have either way dotted line or somehow. Then you of course you have sales enablement.
Yeah.
You have SDR, BDR enablement. You even have kind of customer success enablement when it comes to expansion. So what is your point of view in this regard?
To have all of the positions, or what should be the first position?
You have one, basically it's one overview. So this is basically a facilitator connector in the RevOps part. So this is one person who is dedicated on enablement, but then you have to make sure that sales has his own enablement team, or kind of FTE, but also customer success, because then you, at some point, you aren't an expert in that field, which is needed to improve the processes in sales, for example, or customer success.
Yeah, I think there are very, very different approaches to that, right? First of all, I think in the beginning you do want to focus on rather bringing over very general concepts of how you want to sell as a company, ensuring that everyone is following that, right? And that's something that also probably one person can be doing in the beginning. And this person doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in all areas, right? And I think that's something that you need to embrace also when working in revenue operations. You need to have people who are experts, who are going really deep down, but you also need to have a lot of people who have a very broad understanding of the funnel, right? Because that's actually what's setting it apart from being, for instance, sales ops, or from being only marketing ops, right? You need this holistic layer on top. And that is also what you need to bring on the enablement side. Also, somebody who is doing enablement, it's great if that person is an expert, right? It's probably the best thing that can happen to you, somebody who has worked in that specific field already for 5 years or for even longer. But finding that, especially for startups who are maybe building up their own new product, their own new category, is basically impossible, right? I mean, in my previous role, we built up a conversational AI company. Conversational AI wasn't really even a thing 5 years ago, right? So how would you find somebody who has been doing it that long? And
it's super interesting regarding the skill set. So
definitely.
Especially in kicking off, it totally makes sense for me. So you need someone, if I would rephrase it, who is able to connecting the dots, but then also formulate actions out of this input, because it doesn't help to just analyze. And this is
and be a sparring partner, right? And get your information, soak it up, ask the right people, understand what they are doing. And I have both seen people coming from a sales background and coming from an HR background, leading that enablement position. And also there are good sides and bad sides to either one. And I think also there again, when we speak specifically about this enablement side, it's super important that you also keep the connection to the HR team, to the global enablement, right? Because you as revenue operations, when you do enablement, you want to focus on the go-to-market, but there are also things that you're not responsible for, right? And that
Yeah.
need to be set up on a global level. Cultural onboarding in general, for instance, right? Having a general company set up in onboarding. Those are all things that keep or stay with HR, also very general trainings, I would say. And then you have the more specific support, the more specific learning curve and learning tracks in revenue operations and the enablement in the revenue enablement side.
All right, I have this super insightful and super valuable. So I have a tough question, a last question for you. So just imagine you are entering. We are talking about kind of Series A startup, revenue million revenue plus, and you setting up. You can set up your ideal RevOps team, bearing in mind the kind of Series A still quite early. Who would you nominate, and if you could nominate also your direct reporting line, so how would the setup look like?
If I have to make that choice, I think in a Series A startup, you usually don't have a CRO yet, right? You sometimes have somebody who might become that, but I think the reporting line in such an early stage needs to be to the CEO, and often that's only where startups are starting to actually set up a revenue operations role. And my suggestion then really is to focus also on, or very much on, execution in the beginning, ensuring that your processes are right. You don't have to be super stringent and super detailed in every process, right? There's also too much at some point. We all know that, I think. But it will be way harder for you to change fundamental reportings, to change fundamental processes in your CRM, in your tool stack, when you are bigger. And that's why you need to make that really right in the beginning. I would nominate somebody and hire somebody who is a generalist, who has a good understanding, who has, in the best case, done sales for a little bit herself or himself before, who brings some technical interest, means wants to do a tool setup as well, can do at least a rough setup, right, of your HubSpot, of your Salesforce, and whatever CRM you're using, and who, and I think that's the second most important character trait, who has like this conceptual understanding and who can generalize also across the whole funnel, right? Who can be a little bit of a sparring partner, consultant to the CEO, to the sales leader, to the marketing leader, and brings along this good understanding also for numbers. The most important thing that this person needs to bring along for me is communication skills, especially in the early stage, right? I said you need to be a sparring partner to all of these teams. You need to be a good communicator. You need to say no. You need to understand why you are doing certain things, and you need to communicate that out to the other teams as well. And that's probably the most important character trait. To summarize, communications first, conceptual things and understanding second, bringing some analytical knowledge, a little bit of interest on the tooling side. Those are kind of the four things that I would be looking for. I know it's very hard to find that specific person, but it will be worth it. And you will really make a difference for your company.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I would split. I would go for a budget of two people and really have one strong technical background, ideally worked with HubSpot or Salesforce before, because this is kind of really the glue to everything. And
Absolutely.
then I would go for a strong communication and analytical skills to then translate the insights into operations and really have the stakeholder management along the entire
Yeah,
customer journey. So
absolutely.
that would be my setup for success.
Absolutely, and depending also on your company size, right, and the data you have available, I think it's also very important to bring in somebody with a strong analytical background pretty early. Definitely not one of the first two hires, maybe the third, maybe the fourth hire for the team, but you're in the end the sparrings partner. You need to understand why certain things are working out in a specific way or why they are not working, right? And in the best case, you're getting ahead of the curve. You're in front of the CEO, the COO, the CFO, and can tell them actually already why things are not working out. And then together with your generalist, develop strategies to mitigate that. And together with your tool person that you mentioned earlier, implement it also.
All right. Thanks so much, Alexander. It was, we could spend hours together. So maybe we do a second episode. So
I would
it
love
was a
to.
true pleasure. Thank you so much. So I hope you like this episode. I will share Alexander's link in the show notes. So please share, comment, like if you really enjoyed this episode. And we will see each other pretty soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you so much, Björn.